this meeting to order at 5:31. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
None.
None. Good. Okay. Approval of minutes from December 18th.
I move to approve the minutes from December 18th.
And I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of December 18th. If there's no further discussion, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, public comment on items not on the agenda.
That would be me.
Okay.
Laura Campbell,
Yeah, good.
living at Putney Meadows. My attention was brought to this posting on our bulletin board a couple weeks ago. And it was accompanied, oh, there's my agenda, by this from Stevens Associates. It generated alarm, some interest, but mostly concern of a very personal nature about gardens and digging, and a supposition that the digging would begin March 15th. And I studied this and was very confused and brought it to our town manager. There you go. And she quelled the fears of residents at Putney Meadows to the degree that this would not begin, the digging would not begin March 15th. But where this particular posting came from, and the title across the top with the proposal SEL and the housing note at the top was of concern. Also, it's option number 6, according to the sheet you're holding, Josh. And there is an option number 7, which wasn't posted. So it didn't seem to come from Stevens Associates. Karen confirmed that it was very premature to think of this.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's premature. So,
And since then, I've spoken with Brad Sanderson, who corroborated Karen's reaction. And I'm just inviting people who have concerns to call Karen.
okay, I would tend to agree, especially since this looks like it's Xeroxed onto this paper. I mean, where did this come from? Do we have any idea?
Well, that is the question, but I don't know if we'll get an answer.
Yeah.
There is no site plan for any
No.
housing development.
No.
And nothing's been brought to me
There's-
directly. This,
Land has not changed hands.
Exactly. No, there's not even a,
There's
yeah.
no zone
there's-
posting. Apparently, Rudd is working with PIP, but not yet with the Development Review Board, per se.
Right.
So I wish them well.
Okay.
But the rumors are
Flying.
flying around town, as we know, and
Yes.
this did nothing to,
Well,
yes, quell them.
so is this something that the Affordable Housing Committee would be involved in if this progresses?
Maybe. I mean, it's a private deal, so it's not, the Affordable Housing Committee did not, has not been
No,
involved. I mean,
no.
the Affordable Housing
No.
Committee hasn't met in, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years probably, something like that. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm not sure what role they would play
Okay.
until there's a time. I mean, we could ask the Affordable Housing Committee to convene and asked to be included in the loop as far as this is concerned, but I'm not sure we have any say in it, really. So, I don't know, that's a good question. Maybe one of us, well,
I'm
I
a
should
zoning
stay out of it.
administrator
Right.
too.
So I guess
So-
what I would suggest maybe, Karen, and I'm gonna, because I'm a partial owner of the property, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
you should,
recuse
yeah.
myself from
Yeah.
any discussion. Well, I'm not recusing myself from discussion, but I guess my recommendation would be maybe you contact Wyndham Windsor and see whether they would
I've done that.
what they might suggest as far as including or not including Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay.
And
I
don't know,
think
but-
preliminary planning up front from all stakeholders is important, because I don't wanna see a site plan come to the development review board and they're gonna have to go back to the drawing board.
And my understanding was they planned to hold community forums.
Yes.
Long before
I would think so.
they ever got
Yeah, and I was
anything
told
final.
until a site plan was developed,
Mhm.
we wouldn't see anything. But Laura brought this to my attention, so.
Yeah.
People start posting things around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would chalk this up as strictly fake news. And
Yes.
that, to me, this is a clear warning sign that we should be apprehensive about any information that's being distributed. I have no idea whether this is real, not real, has anything to do with any actual concept that's been presented. So I don't know where that came from, but.
You made demur in answering one question that came up when I was talking with Brud.
Is, it seems to me community garden is on property belonging to Putney Gateways.
Correct.
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I don't.
We
There's
don't,
been no official contact that I'm aware of between Wyndham Windsor Housing, Stevens and Associates, anybody, and the town of Putney.
Correct.
Indicating that this is proceeding in any direction at all. I'm aware, or my understanding is they are having internal discussions.
they are.
But I don't, we officially don't know anything about
We're
it.
not in the loop
Exactly.
officially.
So, Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, first I should like to ask a question about what was just discussed, but after I have some information to share on another topic. My question, as a member of the public and for the other members of the public who are watching and listening, no one has said digging where for what?
Oh, yeah.
Affordable housing, a site for more affordable housing, which is a need, and where to put it. And Wyndham Windsor, that's their mission.
Yeah, no, to be clear, I don't know what digging would be either, because as Laura accurately pointed out, there hasn't even been a transfer of property. So there certainly isn't any digging of is there maybe, I don't know, I'm not aware, I can't answer that accurately for you, but nobody's doing any digging that I'm aware of.
And do I correctly understand that we have been alluding to the current site of the Putney Community Garden?
Well, if you look on the map, it looks like, and again, all I'm seeing is I have heard that there is an effort to maintain space for a community garden, whether it's in exactly the same location or not. I really don't know. That's all. I'm strictly what I've heard is that there has been discussion of maintaining space for a community garden. Beyond that, I don't know anything.
Okay, to share some information, the other day I asked the town manager whether town meeting will be at the school this year. She said yes.
Yeah.
I said, oh good, that means we can have lunch again. She said, don't forget, there's no school district meeting and we may be done too early for lunch. At that point, Ms. Harlow said, brunch. And I just wanted to make that public, give her credit, say, I second it, because we can't possibly be too early for brunch.
The other thing that we have talked about, and actually I don't think it's on today's agenda, but we talked, you may or may not be aware that we talked, I think it was at our last meeting, about exploring possible, whether we should have a different start time in an effort to try and increase or at least allow continued attendance. Should we be doing an afternoon meeting, an evening meeting, so on. So I don't know whether we've gathered any information on that yet, but yes, I would agree that a meal would be great if those that are available whenever that meal happens to be were willing. That would be great, especially since I think it's been in the past a fundraiser for something school related. I can't remember exactly what. Four Winds, that's right,
And
yeah.
then the lunch program.
Yeah, so, but thank you for sharing that. All right, so select board items, Taylor Road Town Property, Jordy Heller and Doug Harlow.
So you asked me to talk to Larry Slayson,
Yeah,
and he came to the office for other things.
you wanna just give a 30-second brief on what
So Taylor
Fine.
Road is owned by the town of Putney.
a parcel on Taylor
Yeah.
Road?
It's like 2.3 acres, and we acquired it in a tax collector's deed back in 2004.
Oh, is that?
Yes. So we have potential interested party in it. So right now we're looking to get the fair market value. And Larry had said to me, we should hire a surveyor to do an on-the-ground, to see if there was any, like, if it's an unimproved or an improved access, because that dictates, the value of the property. So I've spoken to Jordy Heller and Doug Harlow numerous times about this. Doug went out and took a walk, and we have results.
And
And there's a skidder road there,
a what
a
road?
skidder
Oh,
road,
okay, yeah.
not quite a logging road.
Uh-huh.
You can't, if you walk down the middle of it, you can't walk all the time. You have to go around trees and you have to go around puddles, and there are significant ruts, but it's very clear where that road is. And according to some of the information we had, that road dictates one of the boundaries of the property.
Hmm.
And Larry, I understand, said if there is if that's in there, it does change the value of the property. But now what do we call that? Whether it's definitely not a logging road, and it's something less.
Right.
So we
So-
don't know.
And just out of curiosity, did it look like anything had been skidded on it? I mean, what would your guess, has it been there for 25 years or is it new-ish?
My guess was, because there were some stumps and some trees, it looks like somebody might have done some light logging a few years ago,
Okay,
but not real recently.
yeah.
The road up to it, up to where the property starts, has had some trees cut, and they've improved the road that gets to the edge of the property. But once you get onto the property, it's definitely not been used for anything other than several years ago, they might have got some logs out.
So it sounds to me like that really couldn't be considered a road at all. I mean,
Certainly not improved.
no.
Not improved,
Certainly not.
Maybe unimproved by Skinner tracks.
but you can tell where it is. And there are deep ruts where it is. So it wasn't improved to get a truck up there to get logs out with a truck. It looks more like it was
A
used
forwarder
just.
or a skidder or something.
Yep, you got it.
So that will help us dictate what we consider it to be worth. Instead of an improved 2-acre lot, it's less than that.
Yeah, so
Right.
back in 2006, there was a contract, purchase and sales agreement. And the purchase price at that time was $11,300. So basically, we were getting what we lost from back taxes and the cost of the attorney fees and administrative fees. So Jordy and Doug did comparisons for a lot that size, and they came up with some fair market value numbers. And we do have an interested party in that parcel.
So we had already spoken, and I can't remember exactly what the numbers were, but somewhere in the range of 17 to 20,000. Is that what we were talking about?
Yeah, under 20.
Yeah.
And the lot right next to it, which is bigger, was 19.
Yeah.
So I would say 17 to 20, 15 to 20, anywhere in there would be fair.
And did Larry opine on whether we needed to do, if we have an interested party, as we do we need to take other steps in order to notify or advertise before? Because I know
We
we
do.
have had some effort at that, but I'm not sure it's been sort of per a protocol.
Right. So 30 days prior to,
Yeah.
we have to warn it. That
Yeah.
we're gonna, you know, we have the potential to sell this piece of property. And then this potential buyer could show interest. And then we'd have to, you know, have a price
Mhm.
and then negotiate if we needed to.
But we're not obligated to notify other than with a public notice.
Other abutters have been notified twice now.
Right, yeah,
Once when Chip was here
yeah,
and once when I did it last year,
just start, yeah,
so.
okay.
But basically, yeah, put it in the paper and post it in 4 places and on the website,
And that's what it is.
and that's what it is.
So what do we have to do so you can do that? Do we have to?
I would like your blessing.
Do we have to make
Soft spoken.
I've been waiting for
Would somebody like to move that we agree
Yeah.
to take steps forward in the sale of this parcel?
Not move for a blessing? Yeah.
No, I don't want to mix church and state.
I know, right? So
move for
moved.
this one.
Second?
Second, yeah.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve moving forward with a possible sale of this parcel to be notified as appropriately, et cetera. And I guess I would, it's open for discussion, if there's any discussion or opinion, yeah?
The right of way to this piece, is it through the neighboring parcel that sold for 19, or is it a different right of way?
It's along the edge.
It's along, yeah, I believe it's,
It's on that, I think it's on that, but along the edge of it.
But it is a legal right of way, correct?
It does have a
Yes.
legal right of way,
Right,
yes.
okay.
And the part that's on the adjacent parcel hasn't been improved, or has?
The adjacent,
The one that sold for 19, the one,
that's,
that section of the road
one
is.
with the pad.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a road, the road up to the edge of Putney's property has just been widened and improved some. When you get right to the edge, there's a newly poured cement pad. For what reason, I don't really know, but it's there. And then over onto Putney's property, it's just
Not improved,
Nothing.
it's what you described.
Yeah,
Yeah, right,
exactly.
okay, got it.
Should, I know that you inform neighbors, but if we're setting a price, do we want to inform them again that this is actually happening?
Yeah, I don't mind doing it in the letter.
Or at a minimum, say, notify people that it's being warned. I mean, I'm not sure whether there's sort of legal obligation as far
Yeah,
as
that's
that's concerned.
fine.
But, I guess I would inquire of the listers and/or the town manager what any or all of you feel the best way for us to arrive at a price is. I mean, 15 to 20 is a tight range, but it's still, you know, a significant range when you're looking, you know, that's 25% of the value, somewhere between 15 and 20. You know, do you guys, I guess I would, because this is more your line of work than ours, I would love to say if you guys could come up with a price for us, that would be great, but I don't know whether that's appropriate.
Yeah, I don't know if that's appropriate either. Because we're not appraisers.
Right,
We can do comparables and come up with a range.
Yeah.
As just a thought would be, say it's a percentage of the acreage of the one that's directly next to it.
Right.
And it's a little further away, so do a percentage and then back off a little bit
Based on
because it's less accessible.
and it's a recent sale. When was that sale? Just a year?
I
About a
think
year?
it was
Not
pretty
even a
recent.
year. Yeah, it wasn't even a year ago.
Okay.
It's fall.
So maybe we could ask
We
you
could-
guys
we
to
can-
just do a little math on that and say, this is the tighter range and this is where we think it might wanna go. Does that sound fair?
We can do that.
Okay,
And we'll work with Karen on that.
okay.
Start high.
That's your department.
Start fair.
Start fair.
Yeah,
And
Fair and equitable.
right.
Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, I was not planning to ask any questions about this, but one has come to mind, listening to the discussion. It's about the cement pad poured out in the woods. No one does that unless it's for a purpose. So I just wanted to confirm or simply query so that in case it may be important. Is there in fact a right-of-way to the property we're talking about, or is it landlocked?
No, there is a right of way. That's what we were questioning.
Right.
And the cement pad is on this parcel that
The
sold
adjacent.
roughly a year ago.
Is it in the right of way?
No, well, it's right on,
Right near.
near the right of way.
And a ballpark on square footage, Doug? I mean, is it?
It might be something like 12 by something longer, 18, maybe. It's just it's not much of one, but it's.
He plans on building the barn,
Okay.
so I'm aware of it. I'm not aware that he actually put the pad in, but
And that was just an observation. I don't know what, maybe
Right.
that was there before, but it looked,
Right.
it had plastic on it. It looked like it was recently poured. And just telling you what I saw, I guess.
Right. Well, it's a useful thing for the listers to have seen, because now,
Right.
if there isn't a
Right.
permit
Yeah.
taken, then we're aware of it.
yeah.
So, something to follow up on in the future if a permit doesn't turn up. But,
It will, one way or another.
Yes.
all right, good.
All right, thank you
That's all
guys
you
for
have for us.
coming
Thank you.
in.
Yep. Well,
Don't forget your jacket.
My jacket as soon as I step outside.
All right, solar array exemptions, do we want that? Yeah, hey, Jordy?
I forgot Jordy. You know, I think I can talk about it, because once he gave me the
They
numbers.
might want to
Yeah.
be part of the conversation though.
No, they're gone.
Yeah, just quick. Is that other door slamming?
Hey, we got solar arrays too on the agenda. Do you have time for that, or are you gonna run?
I feel about it.
All right.
What about the over 50 code? Do you have enough information that I gave you?
Taxable value.
Yeah, I have enough information, but
I can
we can talk about it, we can table that too.
Well, I don't know, I just don't know what I don't know what we're discussing about them. Whether we want to choose to allow exemptions or,
They're already exempt.
anyway, okay. So again, you want to give background, a little background?
All right.
on
I'm
this?
gonna
Yeah, you
take
go
off
ahead.
if you need me again.
Yep.
Put it on again. And
All right.
Well, and Doug's here.
Or Doug may.
Yeah.
Good.
So I
Thanks,
think I
Rick.
might be okay. So I had asked Jordy about the solar exemptions. So at some point, the town had voted to exempt all solar arrays. And then the state also has an exemption up to like 50 kilowatts.
Is it that big? I thought it was 15, but yeah.
Yeah.
It
So-
started less.
What was that?
Is that right? Okay,
It
yeah.
started less. It started at 10
Yeah.
and then was bumped up to 50 by the state.
Yeah,
That's
so it
pretty
started
sizable.
at 10, then went to 50. That's all, you know.
Essentially an incentive.
Right.
Yeah.
But in Putney, all solar arrays are exempt.
Mhm.
So I asked Jordy and Doug, you know, what the values were for those solar arrays and what the taxable income would be. And so you have it in front of you, a list of the solar arrays. And the total is $4,748. And that would be a year. So I thought the number would be bigger. And it could reduce the overall tax burden. But
Which it would, but how big are these systems? Do we know?
Several of them are about 150.
Okay.
So they're bigger
One
than
of
what
them-
the state would exempt.
Yeah, the one is at Green Mountain is a little smaller. I think that one's 57. And then there's 2 or 3 of them that are at 150 plus or minus. So yes, those that you're seeing are bigger than what the state would exempt.
How many of these were put in after we voted to exempt them?
I don't know, because I don't know when that vote happened.
Well, I'm trying to think, I almost.
Is this the date that they were installed? On the left?
I'm not sure.
I mean, they're all the same date, so it couldn't be.
Right.
I mean, that might be the date that they might have all been installed in one. Oh, I see what you're saying. No, I was looking, I think these are the only.
These are all the same date, okay.
No, right, these are all exempt properties, these are the solar arrays.
Okay.
Right.
That's what I'm, all right.
So and the dates don't change across
No.
either,
What-
so.
What is that date? The date it was voted to be
That
exempt?
would be my
Oh,
guess,
maybe.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I almost think, you know, all of this stuff has been pretty foggy from this, you know, just the sort of anything statutory versus what, so, I mean, I sort of feel like some of them were in place and some were in process, but that's just my memory. I don't know for sure. But it would have been, oh, well, it says yeah, I was gonna say it was about 5 years ago, so actually. I don't know which ones were there and which weren't, but.
So this is the value of all, if they were all taxed, even the ones that are under 50.
Total value,
Total,
613.
Right. So we don't know what the value would be to us on just the ones that wouldn't fall under the state exemption, the ones that are over 50.
These are all
These-
over 50.
yeah,
All
these are-
over 50.
yeah.
That's it, just the ones that are over
Right.
50. Okay, all right.
So,
The other one that's over 50 that I'm aware of is Putney School, but they're a nonprofit, so I would assume they're exempt anyway,
Right.
but I'm not sure.
so I thought that number was gonna be larger, so I think at this point, they're
You know,
exempt and,
we could bring it back up if we chose to, but I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure I don't know, what,
Well, I mean, 4,700 bucks is 4,700 bucks. It's not a lot and it's not nothing.
right.
And is it worth it? Or, you know, I don't know. We would like people to put in solar panels, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, if we had 10 more projects,
right.
then we might wanna reconsider.
Well, and the reality, as you probably are aware, is that right now the grid is saturated for
Right,
projects
right.
of that size, so there aren't gonna be any new projects going forward
Right.
in the foreseeable future, Mr. Fairman.
Chairman, I'm wondering, it's been mentioned that one of the projects has a nonprofit owner.
That's not one of these projects.
Well,
It's one that's not listed on here,
the public school one.
Putney School, yeah.
Okay, fine. Anyway, there may be some nonprofit owners here, but there also may be some that are personal property and some that are commercial property. And I'm wondering if we have any information about that.
These, I believe, are all, none of these, I don't think, are nonprofits. The four that we have listed, we only have 4 listed here. And these are the 4, the only other sizable one that I'm aware of is at Putney School. I don't think we have any other, Tom, I don't think we have any other over 50 in the town of Putney other than these 4 and Putney School. And I'm not sure why Putney School isn't listed on here,
I know.
but I don't know.
So are these commercial properties?
These are. I mean, this is Basketville, Green Mountain Power, not Green Mountain Power, Green Mountain Orchards, Sun Farm, which I think is the one on Route 5, isn't it?
It's,
And
it's-
then Shoal Solar Farm, I'm not sure where
that
that is.
one's down on River Road.
Is that one? Okay, yeah.
Strolls is up on Route 5.
Okay.
Shoal is on Route 5?
So the other one is on River Road, is that right?
One of
Tom?
them.
Yes, that's correct.
Sun Farm is on.
The reason I asked the question, Mr. Chairman, is because it is customary to tax commercial property.
Yes, no, and that was definitely the nature of our discussion at the time when it came up for a vote previously, was, if somebody, I mean, a couple of these are sustaining, Green Mountain Orchards, for example, and I'm speaking a little bit off the cuff here, but they use that power there. I believe Basketville uses their power there. The other 2, I think, support something nearby, but those are essentially commercial. They're, for all practical purposes, they're utilities. And that was the nature of our discussion, is how do we want to do this? 5 years ago, the atmosphere for solar was more aggressively saying, yes, we want to do this, but I don't think we want to discourage people from doing this either. So that's a tricky, I don't know. I mean, I personally would not object to it being a discussion again at town meeting.
I think we should for sure
But-
discuss it.
But I don't know whether we want to, how we would want to approach whether we have a opinion about it or whether it's just a discussion. And I think we would need to invite these folks to comment on it, and also, I don't know whether the state would have any, I don't know whether, for example, does the Public Service Board now treat this size differently than they did 5 years ago? I have no idea. So, how we would, would we put it, I guess we would, if we want to have it come up as a discussion again, we would need to put it on as an article.
Right.
So, I don't object to doing that. Whether we want to or not, we should probably talk about that when Laura's here, and so at our next meeting.
Yep.
Yeah, which is next
Let's
week.
revisit that. Doug, you got any opinions from a lister's perspective?
No opinion,
Okay,
just information.
yeah.
Okay.
No, and I think we would want to certainly, if we were to put it on an article, as an article, we would clearly want to notify these folks and allow them to make clear statements about. But we might also want to check with public service and other, I don't know.
Right.
You got an opinion, Tom? No. All right.
Okay. Thank you
Thanks,
very
Doug.
much. Have a good night, Doug. Thanks.
Actually, Doug, before you go, one more question I have on here. I mean, it seems to me one of these is 150, and I think Jordy said, or somebody said that Green Mountain Orchards is 57. I'm surprised because all of the values of these fall between 141,000 and 163,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm surprised that there's that big a range of kilowatt hours and that small a range of values. I don't know.
Right.
Jordy and I tried to figure out how, we did not set these numbers,
Okay.
okay? They were set for us.
But do you know, was that in the
Well,
was that in the
That
reappraisal?
was,
Do you know?
I think it was at reappraisal. But there's a special formula, I believe, that they use.
Okay.
That is based on the income approach as opposed to.
Oh, okay.
So there's a way to calculate that, and Jordy and I could not find the formula
Okay.
to actually do it.
So there may be like a base value for the infrastructure and then it's
Could be based
determined
on
by, yeah, I have no
how much
idea.
it produces. But Green Mountain did increase theirs, it was smaller, and then
Oh.
they went back and applied to increase it to the 57, which just got them over 50.
Okay.
But again, Jordy and I tried to calculate those ourselves and find out how you did it. And we searched the Vermont Department of Taxes website, and we searched a couple of places and could not find. Doesn't mean that it's not in there, we just couldn't get to it at the time.
The other person who might be helpful to comment on this would be Cy.
We had a call into.
Did you?
Into
Okay.
SI, yep. Yep.
Just to see whether other towns are
Yep.
doing it a certain way. So maybe we can follow up on that before the next meeting.
Sure.
But, all right, good. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Blessing for you too.
He locked the door. We're done. All right, fire department draft budget.
You still here, Tom?
Yep.
Okay.
So, obviously, I was in once to present our budget. Nothing really has changed with that. Just in having discussions with Karen, just wanted to talk about, I think, two things specifically. One was the inclusion within the capital budget of our ventilation system, diesel exhaust ventilation system at the firehouse.
I
don't
see a copy
So you want the general fund,
Okay.
and within the general fund is the fire department.
Yeah,
And,
so just add, it's not broken out from the general fund.
no,
Okay. Sorry, Tom, I was distracted. So including in the budget the possibility of.
In the capital budget, yeah. Yep. Which is 104,000.
I put 103,000.
103, yeah, that's what it is, 103.
And then there was also the discussion, we have in the articles the potential for a fire engine.
Yeah, and we can talk about that some
But that's
more
not
tonight.
really in your, that's a different.
No, that was
I don't know.
just something for your consideration, and if we move forward, we do.
So since Tom's first draft, this is the second draft. In the revenue, you're gonna see a line item for note proceeds for 103,000. This is for the exhaust.
This is under firefighting and EMS, where is this, let's see, 103,000. It's on the next, oh, truck and equipment, yeah, okay.
All right, so on page, where am I here? Sorry, guys. Page 2, you're gonna see the revenue coming in for the 103,
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah,
okay? So that's the amount to be borrowed.
right.
And then in the capital plan is a 5-year note to pay off that 103,000. So the payments would be, the principal payments are $20,600, and it won't start until FY '22. Okay?
Principal payments only, so
Right.
interest, what would we be? What would interest
I
payment
haven't
be
gone
for?
out to the bank to find
Okay.
out, but I would think it'd be at least, maybe $1,000.
Over 5 years.
Depends on the rate too.
What did you say the principal was?
Might be 5 a year.
20,600.
Might be 5,000 a year interest payment. Is that right? That wouldn't be the total interest over a 5-year period, would it?
No, not over a 5-year period,
Right,
no,
yeah, exactly.
per year.
Right, yeah, okay.
So here's a debt schedule too, that might make more sense to you. So the very first section is the fire station.
Yeah.
So if you look in FY '21, that's what we're gonna be paying for. And actually, that 20,600 needs to go over a line.
So, but this doesn't,
This gives you the capital
This-
for the fire station only.
but, okay, but this does not show the possibility of a new fire engine.
Absolutely not.
Right, okay.
No. No, I
Okay.
did not go that far.
Yeah, so, vehicle exhaust system, okay, yeah.
But I can for the next meeting, Josh.
Well, we know, let's see, so you only show, oh, okay, just because we're not out beyond that. You only
Right.
show 4 main payments, but it would be, that's just because,
Right.
And
That's
that's
why
why that
25
first one
doesn't
doesn't
show
even
up.
count.
Yeah, that first one is.
Yeah, the first one has to be, it's gonna be, the first year would be FY '22. So, because you borrow the money the year you voted in.
right, and then you
And
don't make a
then
payment until.
your first
yeah,
payment is the following year.
Yeah. So we,
And
yeah,
just so you're aware as well, as far as that funding is concerned, one of the hose drops that would be included in the system is for, a vehicle that we do not own.
yeah,
It's the state, one of the state hazmat trucks.
yeah,
We don't own that, we house it for them, period. And it's been that way since 2006. We've never charged the state any rent, anything else for that. In talking with the chief of the hazmat team, I've requested that should this go through, should this be approved, when the time comes, that they pay for their portion of it.
right.
Which would be roughly $13,000. I'm hopeful that will happen.
And they said they were likely to do that, right? That was my impression.
That was the initial discussion.
Which, you know, I mean, if we figure the borrowing would be roughly 3%, somewhere in that range, those
Yeah,
two numbers
yeah.
more or less come out even, I mean, within a couple thousand bucks, those come out.
Yeah.
even. But, okay,
So I just wanted to explain to you that we did put it in the budget
okay.
for the exhaust system.
It might be well, let's see, yeah, I was gonna say, it might be worth calculating based on current interest rates and just having that, including that number in here, and then, you know, if we end up getting money from the state,
Right.
that would drop that down by that amount, but just so we're not, just so we show interest as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
You talked about grants for this and you'd looked and there wasn't any, right?
There are none
Yeah. that's what I thought.
available. I've looked, in a lot of different directions.
Yep.
I've specifically asked our insurance company, if number one, they could be of any help, and number two, if they could guide us
Yep.
to a possible grant opportunity. They didn't have anything for us. I confirmed with, at the time, last year, when we applied for our AFG grant, our federal grant, that we missed the cutoff, if you will, by 1 year.
Because of construction.
That's right, yeah. When our station was built at that point, any systems like that should have been included. And if everybody remembers, or for those that don't, it'll be new, obviously. When the building was in the planning, when our firehouse was in the planning stages, that was one system that was
And got cut.
included.
Yeah.
And then when we got to the end, it got cut.
Here, thank you.
All right. Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering, this may be a question for the chief. Do volunteers for the fire and rescue department have to pay out of pocket for their training and certification?
No, we reimburse, well, we pay for the training and certification, and we additionally pay them
For training hours.
a time for the time that they put into it. Not at a tremendously high rate, but at a rate that makes it more palatable.
Thank you.
I mean, those limitations, as you probably are aware, or not those limitations, but those those training. I mean, what's a firefighter, how many hours is in a firefighter one now?
Just over 200.
So, you know, asking somebody to volunteer 200 hours before they can even start volunteering is a significant number, so. All right. That all for fire department?
Do you want to discuss the fire truck?
I guess I would tend to want to defer that again until Laura is also
Okay.
here. Because of course, I mean, I think we should review the articles, but, you know,
Yep.
when we're.
Discussion.
I guess I would ask your opinion, Tom, as to whether, is it premature to think about putting this on as an article this year?
I think the big driving piece to that is simply saving money.
Right.
And what we would, even just for 1 year, we would potentially save, 19.5, about $22,000.
You're talking about basically the 4% per year
Right.
increase.
Yep,
as-
plus the decrease in
Yeah.
the value that we would realize
Right.
from our
Right.
present truck.
Yeah,
So it would be, like I say, 25 grand difference in 1 year.
yeah. Which, when you're looking at an expense this high, is not a huge percentage, but when you're looking in real numbers,
Right.
25 grand is 25 grand.
Right.
So,
5 years
Yeah.
worth of the gain back from.
yeah. Yeah, no, and I guess, Tom, I would just say, and you know, you obviously already do this and know this, but, you know, you would need to be well prepared to explain this article
Oh, absolutely.
at the
And
time.
again, as I said, the first time we talked about this,
Right,
this is not something that we are pushing for.
right. It's just
It's simply, I mean, over the lifespan, or not the lifespan, but over the course of the next 4 years, we're gonna be looking at, for the same exact truck that we've spec'd now, we're gonna be looking at a considerable amount more money.
Which is exactly that 25, I mean, if you take that 25,000 that you were just
Per
talking
year.
about, and exactly.
And then we would have about what we're forecasting to be a $50,000 swing on top of that, from what we can realize for our existing truck now
Right.
versus what we would then. So
It's not
that's,
insignificant.
yeah, that's not insignificant at all when you total that all up.
Yeah.
Tom and I started researching the financing, so we're looking at lease. We've gone to Vermont
Looking at lease
at a lease.
to.
Purchase,
purchase.
yeah,
Okay,
yep. 15-year term, and we're also looking at Vermont Municipal Bond Bank.
yeah.
But I wanna reach out to some banks.
Would lease to own would E1 then finance it if we were leasing to, is that how that would work?
They have a program.
Yeah,
I think this was a slightly different program that Karen was looking at.
Community leasing partners.
so that's some sort of municipal. Yeah. Good.
I mean, the numbers are not outrageous, but again, another 45,000 a year, that's a lot of money.
Right.
So we have to do a little more research.
And I would say, I mean, I don't know whether you got their name from E1, but it would certainly, you know, in the interest of that, it would be worth probably discussing that with E1 directly as well. I mean, if they're a middleman, I'm not assuming that they're trying to make a whole lot of money.
And the reality is, the other vendors that we've spoken with, we'd be asking the same
Yeah.
information.
I would think so.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Anything else to add? Good, thanks, Tom.
So would that be back on
Next week.
week's?
Yep,
Okay.
I'll get with you. Okay?
All right,
Thank you, Tom.
See you,
Good night.
You too. All right, Highway Department draft budget.
So in your packet, there is a cheat sheet in your packet, budget note.
Yeah.
Kind of outlines what increased, what decreased. I spoke to Brian, worked with him on his budget. So we're pretty, it's fine tuned. I think we're ready with the highway department. I do want to point out in your packet that you have a balance sheet for the highway department. So it's showing right now a surplus for prior years, fund balance of $176,084.72. So that's what Brian's carrying for a surplus in the highway department.
Wow.
So, standard for rainy day or for an emergency is to keep between 8% and 12% in that budget.
Which this is probably not that far off from, is that
It's only
correct?
about 100 and, well, okay, so 8% would be 120,000 and 12% is 180,000.
And you were saying-
So that surplus,
So we're good right where we are.
just keeping that surplus as,
Yes.
for all practical
Yep.
purposes, a rainy day
Yeah.
fund. Yeah.
Unless
Or-
they wanted to reduce it to 8 instead of 12.
If you want to
Yeah.
reduce it to 8, you can take that reserve, you can put it in a reserve for something, let's just say equipment.
$60,000.
Or you can reduce what needs to be raised by that amount.
Right.
But that's totally up to the board, how they want to handle that.
Do you have a recommendation or a preference? I mean, from
Well,
a finance director, I personally think that probably having,
it went up,
maybe we split the difference, I don't know.
right. So Brian's budget did go up, but we added the gravel pit.
Right.
And all that information is on this sheet. We also had to add in half of the property taxes that we have to pay on the gravel pit, which is another $6,500.
Right.
We had realignment, of salaries in the highway department, which increases the FICA pension and the workers' comp insurance. Crushing and blasting was added to this budget, something that we didn't have last year. We're going to the people to borrow money for a new dump truck at $190,000.
So
So-
sorry to interrupt, the 18,000 for blasting, we would do that contribution, or that would be a line item every year, but we would only expend it every 3 to 5 years, I think we were thinking, right?
Right, so the blasting, the 18,000, my recommendation is to create a reserve fund for that money.
Right.
And every year you put in 18,000, and then when it's time to blast,
6 days, yeah,
then
every
we
3 to
use
5
it.
years we have it.
but
Yeah.
then it's isolated from
Right.
the
Right.
whole highway
Spike.
budget.
Yeah,
So we should do that.
So should we keep this surplus in the account because we're adding all these expenses to the highway department that we didn't have before this year? Or-
but these are already included in this budget, so that's still,
Why
that
did we
surplus
increase?
is a carryover,
Right,
After this?
yes,
Okay, okay.
right?
so, yes, so we were up, was it 6,000? Yeah, right? I don't have my
6,000 up, I don't know what you're saying.
So for 21, we have to raise $895,005.46. So this budget, we were raising $833.86. You're right here, Josh. Come sit next to you.
Where's this
Hey,
coming
you're
from?
talking
So
about
this
this
is-
at town meeting.
Yeah.
I have you know.
Yeah, no, this is when we all turn to you.
So right here, so this is where we're at right now, and
Right.
this is where.
Proposed, so
Right.
$60,000 difference. You said 6.
Yeah, I said 6, I said, that doesn't look like,
No.
it's $60,000,
Increase, which is
Increase.
that's most of, that's this.
that's all
Right.
of that.
Yeah,
Plus what we reduced it by, eliminating a full-time position, and
Oh,
all
right,
of the
because we were
benefits.
carrying $60,000 a year.
Right.
Right, exactly.
Yep,
That's why it makes sense. I'm
Yep.
thinking this doesn't make sense. How can it be
So,
increase all these expenses and still carry that surplus? But yeah.
right.
right.
And the other thing, you made a comment last year at town meeting about having grant money showing in the budget as a revenue and as an expense.
mhm,
So our bottom line,
Right.
if you look at this, see the difference?
right, that's the grant money involved.
That's the grant money, the
Yeah.
$300,000 that we don't have
This
for
year, right.
21. So it does inflate your numbers. But to be transparent, you want to show it.
Right, and it doesn't change the tax implications.
No,
I
no.
mean,
Because it still balances.
No, because it's,
This does change the tax implications. Right. So that additional 60 is largely due to these. But we will be saving on material, yeah. I mean, this is the part of that discussion we had about, you know, the curve over the long term, you know.
Right.
We're increasing in the short run.
Yes.
With the hope and assumption
Yep.
that, you know,
in 10 years, you're gonna see it start to level out.
as Carpenter Pit goes out of the picture,
Right,
et cetera, that's gonna be the big shift. And-
Yep.
And then ultimately, at the 25-year mark, when the bond is paid off.
Right.
Then it'll really make a big difference. Okay.
Yep. So, yeah, that's the highway department.
Mr. Fairman?
Mr. Chairman, a question has come to mind. You mentioned that the town of Putney pays taxes on our co-owned gravel pit in Dummerston.
Yeah.
Does the town of Dummerston pay property taxes?
They, I would assume, exempt themselves from that
Yes.
parcel, but I'm not,
Yep,
I don't know that to be the fact, but I would assume no, because that would be taking it out of one place and putting it in another, so I would, my guess would be no.
I'm thinking, you see here, the general principles, just as you have said, and the state, which of course owns property in a bunch of towns, but actually is not a resident of any, also doesn't pay property taxes.
Right.
And I'm wondering what the rationale may be for Putney paying property taxes to Dummerston for our, as a municipal government, for our co-owned gravel pit. It's just a rhetorical question. I don't.
It was certainly part of the discussion, and it came up on numerous occasions, but the assumption, because, I mean, my recollection is that, by Renault, who was not a municipality, selling the pit, that was a decrease in tax revenue to them
Right.
of whatever the total would be, $12,000 a year. And so we assumed responsibility for half of that because we are not town of Dummerston. But it's a valid question. I don't know whether there would be statute or precedent related to that. It never came up that Larry Slayson, who's town council, he vetted this very thoroughly, and I know he was part of that discussion as well. So my assumption is that it's appropriate that we're paying taxes, but we could double check that. But I think it was part of the agreement anyway.
The reason I asked is because sometimes in Vermont, something gets done one place because somebody did it, and then it becomes standard practice, but meanwhile, other places are doing it differently, and no one's ever reconciled them.
I'm aware of that, and I agree with you. I would say, Larry Slayson, again, he's not a novice at this, so I think he would have picked up on that if that weren't an anomaly, but I don't know for sure. And
Well, this is maybe a silly question, but at Municipal Day, they did hand out a flyer to us about the federal surplus program that you can sign up to find out what things they have that are, excess to them that they're willing to sell at, part with at very cheap prices according to what they said. I don't know if it's true. And I just wonder, have we ever investigated that? Have we been involved and ended up with things that just fell apart, or is that a possibility? They just listed dump trucks as one of the things.
we have definitely investigated it the last time we investigated it that I remember was a long time ago. I remember this conversation happening, and it was related, I think, to a pump
If we look at the generators.
Right.
But, well, pumps, generator, I remember it was sort of related to pump, generator, and, I wanna say there was something else, we had that conversation ago, but it was a long time ago, and it would probably be worth looking into, but yeah, for generator,
For the
yeah.
septic and the water.
especially,
Right.
especially if you were to have a trailerable
Exactly.
unit, you know, they easily could have one of those
Right.
sitting around.
Yeah.
Have
Yep.
other municipalities done it that you could talk to who would tell whether or not they had a good experience or a bad one?
I'm sure we could. My recollection is that much of the equipment that was available, at least at the time when we had the discussion before, was very specialized and/or sort of oddballs for various different reasons. And, you know, I think the overall impression was it probably didn't make sense for us, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't
Right.
re-explore it. I think my guess would be with something like a dump truck, you know, that our needs are so specific, the likelihood of the two matching and/or the expenses of us having to retrofit it for our purposes would probably offset the savings. But I think it's something we should always be exploring. I think Brian keeps an eye on that kind of thing
Yes.
too,
I'm
though,
not
so.
sure, notification of what's available, I think they said on the flyer.
Yeah.
Of course I couldn't find, but it's there somewhere.
Yeah,
It-
yeah, we should certainly explore
We'll
it.
look at, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll look into that.
For a generator in particular. I mean, I think
Yes.
things like a dump truck, again, that would be tricky,
Right.
but a generator might be just the kind of thing that they've got, you know, 6,082 that just came back from Iraq or Afghanistan or somewhere, sitting in a lot somewhere.
Or some FEMA thing.
And they, yeah, who knows,
Who
you know?
knows, right?
Yeah,
Half of them didn't even get used.
Right.
Or it can be a nightmare.
Right.
That's the problem.
Yes,
You could buy it
exactly.
and then put an equal amount into it to make it run, and you should have bought it.
right,
Right.
The price they were giving for one of the dump trucks was $500, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like,
I can guarantee you, you'd be putting more than 500 into it to make it run, okay?
No, and I remember, actually, it reminds me, in comic books, you used to see in the back, US surplus, you know, Jeeps. And I remember, I had a friend who explored that pretty thoroughly, because they said, you know, old Willies and so on, and there just weren't, they weren't, it wasn't what it looked like. You know, and I think some people probably do beautifully by them, but
just, I have no
I think it's hit or
experience.
miss, but yeah, no, it's an interesting
It'd
idea.
be nice to have an
definitely.
inside connection with whoever runs the auction or whatever it
And
is.
say,
So you
grab
can
this
say,
one.
this
Yeah.
is number 17. Get
Exactly.
Number 17,
Yeah.
right.
Well, and I think actually the state does that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
they end up with stuff, whether it's, you know,
Depends on what it is.
you know, if it's related to state police activity or other things, they end up with excess stuff that gets auctioned off, but, worth exploring. All right, highway department, anything else?
No,
Did we answer the question though?
Which,
Between 8 and 12 would be surplus.
Whether
About
we
the
should-
reserve
whether you should hold it or whether,
I think we should wait for Laura.
I would agree. I think that if we want to change it, I would say,
It's an option that we can lower that.
yeah, I mean, maybe we split the difference. Again, if we go with 10%, we're saving roughly
Right.
150
Yeah.
and putting it aside, and we're putting 22 or 26 back, whatever,
Right.
which would offset a penny on the tax rate,
Yep,
you know, that certainly isn't a bad thing.
no,
Right, it's a good thing.
no, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah,
Could be used somewhere else where it looks like we have a need.
Right.
yeah. No, and I mean, you know, I think unfortunately, the reality, as we all know, is that most of this comes out in the wash somewhere, so, you know, we can chop it off here and put it back there, but, you know,
Yeah.
when it comes to that kind of money, it just, I mean, that's the same with the solar discussion, it's like, it's $4,700, which, as you accurately point out, is not nothing, but when you look at how it affects any individual taxpayer, it's almost non-existent, you know, so, but every penny counts.
Right.
All right. So, no, we didn't answer the question.
still haven't.
No. And I just want to make sure we're not making you wait for some, are you here just, or,
I'm just wondering about whether the articles are gonna include the the town forest or not.
Well,
But I'm certainly interested in what's happening, so I'm not bored.
We're not, okay, as
Yeah.
long as you're not wanting to get it, because we could shift things around, but, all right, so general fund draft budget is next. And we've already been through a little bit of that in the fire department.
Right.
But
so,
anything you want to highlight?
no, it's all on your budget notes. So, increase in the library appropriation by $19,443. So their budget did go up by that amount.
Which my, a big portion of that primarily was health insurance for somebody, as I recall, is that correct?
We're carrying one family
Right.
and then one single. And,
Isn't that the one thing, I thought that was the one thing that really went up by it.
yeah, and then, salaries went up by $5,000. And
Who was gonna add? Who was, oh, they wanna hire somebody, that was.
that's not happening.
Yeah, so then why does it need to increase? I mean, more than the normal increase, right?
The health insurance went up by 12,160.
Right, that's the,
Yeah,
okay.
so, and, you know, when you change health insurance too, the HRA changes because it adds to it. So that went up by $1,125 as well. So,
No, and this, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this before, but, you know, this question of 3% COLA is also, you know, that's the same kind of thing. It's like, when you look at how much actual money it is versus what it does percentage-wise for the tax rate,
right.
you know, it's not a small number to increase it by 3%. But when you look at what the percentage of how that changes tax rates, it's like, I mean, we have that discussion regularly of, you know, is that the right thing to do? It's a tough one, you know, I mean, I think we all always would agree that we would like to increase people as much as we can, but where's that money coming from and what's the implication?
Oh, yeah, it's a hard balance. I'm trying to see this from both sides.
Yeah.
It's,
No, and I think one of the frustrating things when you know, you and I had this conversation before you started, you know, it's all little bits. And, you know, to have any significant impact, you have to change so much. You know, it's all the little pieces that add up to the budget, and, you know, and there's no single thing you can do except for changing something very significant,
Right.
like the amount of services provided by the fire department or the highway department. If you don't change that dramatically, it really doesn't change taxes very much, unfortunately, and that's so frustrating, but it's.
well, we
but it's
changed
the reality.
everything a little bit to try to knock it back. Right, exactly. So-
Incrementally.
And that's
down.
hard to do because people expect a certain level of service.
Yeah.
and That's difficult.
And nothing, you know, I mean, I think one of the things that I think about often when people sort of say, how come taxes keep going up, is that everything, I mean, there is not a single expense in my life that I'm aware of that decreases over time. I just non-existent, you know, so how do you, and when you add all of those bits together and each of them increases incrementally over time, how do you counter that? There's just no way, you know?
So I did add computer IT support at $12,600, and that is an annual fee. Because right now, we don't have anyone. When we have a problem, try to troubleshoot, it's like a half a day.
So
Working with-
so would that be somebody on retainer, or what,
It would be a contract.
and who would do that? Do you know?
So I have 3 quotes.
Okay.
One is local.
Mhm.
One already does the IT for the fire station.
Mhm.
And right now, they're the lowest. The other 2 are like up in northern Vermont. And one is like at $21,000 a year, so. I could toss the low and toss the high and just, you know,
But the low is the local or the low is not the local?
the low is the local.
And that's the 12.6.
Yeah,
And they do the fire department.
yes.
And Tom's happy with their service?
Yes, very happy.
Then I would say go with the low, don't toss the low, unless there's a compelling reason to do
You know,
otherwise.
talking about increasing though, but that's a big ticket item. But
Yeah,
honestly, we've not felt that we're safe, you know,
right.
from cybersecurity here.
No, and I think it's so specialized that,
That's a whole nother like position for somebody, and I'm not qualified to do
right, yeah,
the IT stuff.
right. No, and when you say that, you know, the reality of how many hours you guys can probably chew up trying to do that versus what it costs to have somebody come in for 4 hours on a Friday morning, you know,
They would be coming in once a month
and just tuning it and
and,
then,
yeah, and getting us, you know, protected,
I would think that would be
yeah,
valuable.
yeah. So, so in your general fund, as you can see, on page 1 of 13,
Mhm.
so for the fiscal year 2021, it did go down compared to what we had to raise for this year.
And what, that's a pretty significant amount. What do you attribute that to?
I attribute some of that to the $182,000 grant that Tom was awarded.
Oh,
Again, the inflationary number on paper, it just,
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Yeah.
that was in last year's budget, not
Correct.
this year's budget.
Yep.
Right. So that's certainly part of it, yeah.
yeah.
But that's not a $182,000 difference, so that's only part of it.
No, because there's.
Some of that, well, like you say, it reflects
It's-
these increases. in
Right,
that.
yeah, all of these, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. All right, anything else?
Oh, and the balance sheet too is on the very first page. So for the general fund, we are carrying a surplus of $109,558.82. So that would stay in there for
And that was as of close of fiscal year,
19,
yeah.
yeah.
Same thing, we could choose to shift some of that in order to decrease the tax rate. You know, I think for a budget of our size, having, if you just look at it straight up, that's roughly
It's a little
roughly
low.
10 to 11% of the budget.
That is below 8%, the 109. So it's based on your overall budget, so it'd be like
Oh,
1.5.
right, not the,
Right,
yeah, okay,
right.
I see, yeah,
So
Hmm.
it's operating budget.
yeah. Yeah,
So that general fund would change with a fire truck. Just saying.
oh yeah. By 5%-ish, 5 to 6%, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think whether we decide, you know, I mean, we put it on as an article and people say yes or no.
Right.
I think the reality is that we are gonna need that truck, maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but certainly, I mean, when we're scheduled for retirement of the current engine one,
Right.
you know, we're gonna need a truck at some point, so I think it's not a bad idea to at least start warming people up to that number, and maybe it passes this year because of the discussion we've had about how it saves money in the long run. It's a heck of a number though,
Yeah.
but again, what do you do? I mean, we can't choose not to have a fire truck, so,
And the fire station will be paid in 2027, which is
So
a
that's-
payment of
yeah.
42-ish thousand a year.
Which is roughly comparable to what that fire truck payment would be.
Correct.
So it seems to me that the thing to look at is what all the big payments for the projects we've been doing come due, and pick the time that's best for us fiscally to buy the truck, irregardless, considering to what we might lose in trade-in. Maybe it's better in 5 years to do it
It might
because
be.
something else is dropping off.
That debt
You know,
service.
it's like, how do we look at that whole
Yeah.
picture?
Yeah.
I have no experience at this, or these
If
kind of
you
numbers, but
Study that chart,
the,
you'll see things starting to fall off like next year.
mhm.
And that's gonna be key to whether we borrow or we create a fund to purchase equipment.
Right.
So it's gonna be up to the select board if you wanna continue borrowing or we try to,
Start creating a
Yes.
capital fund for
and
equipment.
start buying.
Which is better to do? Is it better to save money and do it, or is
Well,
it better
right
to
now, the
borrow?
interest rates are still low enough.
That's the problem.
So it behooves us to borrow. Is that what you're
It
saying?
doesn't necessarily behoove us, but it's not very painful.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So, you know,
We can
I mean,
tolerate it stays level, more or less.
Mhm.
and when we do borrow, we borrow at fixed rates, so
Mm-hmm.
that's good. I mean, my feeling would be I don't know, I guess my feeling would be maybe we do a little bit of both. Maybe we start to build a capital fund.
I think we can
and-
transition with that schedule right there,
Yeah,
but we
and
gotta,
say over 5 years, we're gonna start paying this much less
Right.
and we're gonna put this
Yes.
much in. But as long as interest rates are, I mean, you know,
And even as these things drop off, won't other things come along? You're gonna need
Of
another
course.
truck. So how realistic is this? Won't some of these slots get filled up by the next truck that we need?
not necessarily unless you create an equipment fund.
Okay.
well,
So-
no, you're right, they will drop off, but essentially it's cyclical. So, I
Right.
mean, it'll do this, but when you look at a long term, it's doing this.
Right.
You know, I mean,
Where you want it to do this,
Right.
you want it to,
ideally,
yes.
but
How
the
realistic
reality
is
of
that?
everything. Yeah.
But everything gets more expensive, so.
Exactly,
Right.
yeah, no, there's
Right.
no avoiding that aspect of
So-
it.
First year in 32, my expenses are down this year in my shop, first year in 32. And that's because I did so much more myself this year.
Yeah,
That your what prices are down?
My expenses in my
Oh,
shop
is that
actually
right?
went down,
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
time in 32 years. Yeah, so, doesn't seem that realistic to me.
And
This is just, I have an information question. Which engine are we talking about?
engine one,
Engine one,
which is the first engine out, the vast majority of the time,
okay,
purchased in 1994
okay.
as a brand new truck, right? No, 2004, 1994.
yeah.
1994, so
Um,
long ago.
And life expectancy, you know, we're pushing, getting to the life expectancy. But, you know, the assumption on the initial, I mean, Tom was saying, you know, our scheduled replacement is in 2024, so life expectancy was 30 years. This truck cannot be, with our engine 2, we refurbished a few years ago for a fraction of the cost of buying new. This truck is not, because of its design and age, is not amenable to that.
And it sounds like a real workhorse. It is the first engine.
It's just gotta run,
Yeah.
when you turn the key, we need it to do its thing, definitely.
Keep-
And it's still doing that, but the value of it, that's one of the big things that you might or might not. Right now, it probably, or they have told us, E1, the company who we've been discussing it, they'll give us roughly $100,000 back for it, which is a chunk of money. In 4 years, Tom, I think, said they'd probably give us roughly $20,000 for it, so,
Yeah.
you
And
know.
the cost of the engine then will be considerably higher than new.
But-
So it's good, so it's spreading the wrong way both ways.
Yeah.
But there are auction companies that might be able to auction that truck off.
Uh-huh.
and not get a trade. So we might still get value to it,
Well,
to the right.
In 4 years or
Yeah,
5
yeah.
years. Yes, but
Some
we're
money.
not likely to get 100,000. We might get 50 as opposed to 20,
We
but
don't know that. If
Yeah.
there's a department out there that needs
is
that
dying for that
truck,
truck.
you know, they may
Yeah.
pay 80,000 for it.
Yeah.
And we didn't discuss the other end of it too, which was
I know.
the quality of the truck that he'd like to buy, which would be rebuildable in the long run. We haven't talked about what would he
Right.
like to buy another engine one, like the one we have now. Would that save us money and run us for 30 years? And if we look at the big picture of everything, would that be a good choice?
Right.
And we hadn't talked about that part of it, but
I mean, I think that, you know, Tom's answer to that would be that this has been a good workhorse truck for us and, you know, we've gotten our value out of it. And I was on the committee that designed that spec'd that truck at the time when we purchased it. And I can't remember what we paid for that truck, but, it was a fraction of what we paid. It was under 200, I think, as I recall. And now it's 650.
But we're not, but he's not looking at buying another one like the one we have. He's looking at
A little
buying-
bit heavier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
what would the comparison be? Would the new one
184.
like the one we have now?
184, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Would the new one like we have now be 4 instead of 670 or whatever? Would it
We
be-
did talk, we brought
Because I
that
can't
up, and I
remember
can't,
which one.
yeah, I can't remember either. No, he had a reason why I can't remember. We did talk about that.
I think the reason he had was because one, it's a better truck and it helps him do his job better because it's more reliable and it would be rebuildable in the long run. So in the big picture, it's
Value.
more economical. But right now, like you chose then,
Right,
there was a reason to not
yes,
get the
to
best.
buy that truck.
So
Yeah.
maybe we need to talk about that.
Yeah. Yep,
Chairman,
yes.
It occurred to me that when you were talking about how budgets always increase, of course, yes, they do. I'm going to suggest that department heads be asked what they have done to save money and that this be documented.
Are you talking sort of over time, or are you talking just in what context?
In the context of a budget. We would like
Yes.
to, we would like to increase the budget by X dollars.
Right.
Well, a question is, because we all are trying to keep the budgets down.
Right.
You are as to the department head, you are the most expert person in your area
Yeah.
of municipal government.
Yeah.
What have you done to reduce expenses or keep them down?
Yeah.
And often there are things that can be done, but the point is, if people are asked explicitly, and if this is documented, then it tells taxpayers, first,
Right.
everything that could have been done has been done, and therefore the increase we're paying is
Necessary.
Is necessary.
Yeah, no, and I think that, I mean, I think that, our finance directors, as they may be at any given time, over time, in my experience, have been pretty, I mean, I know Karen doesn't go easy on Tom saying, go ahead and spend whatever you want.
No.
So I think we could get clear answers to that question. I don't know whether you've explicitly asked it that way.
No.
But Tom, you know, my overall sense is that both Tom and Brian work hard to keep their budgets as, you know, reined in as they
Right.
can. But I think we can always push back on that. But I think Tom would probably have a pretty good answer for you. My guess would be.
I am not in any way implying criticism of
Yeah, no, I get
department
it.
heads.
Yeah.
I'm simply saying that taxpayers looking at, well, we're going to pay extra money. Well, what have you done to minimize this?
Right.
Right.
It is something that could be in the town report or could be simply reported at town meeting.
Yeah.
That's the documented part.
Yeah.
In our department, we did this, this, and this, and we're going to pay less or we're going to minimize an increase because we did.
Yeah.
And other things like, I don't know, health insurance, sorry, there's nothing we can do about it.
Right.
But there is. We just gotta be competitive on that with the insurance. So we're already thinking about next year, Howard, on how to reduce those costs.
Well, health insurance I brought up simply as an example.
An example, yeah.
Right.
Everyone knows that health insurance goes up because it does.
Yeah,
I like your point a lot. As a taxpayer, I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. You know, has everybody looked to see, are we being as careful as possible?
and I think the general answer is yes,
Yes.
but,
And that shows in Brian's surplus every year.
absolutely,
Right.
yeah, no, the other place that I would say, and I know you're not saying it as a criticism, and I'm not saying this as a defense so much as just a comment, you know, the other thing that has definitely shifted as of late, over the last 5 years-ish, is the amount of grant money that we bring in. And I think that's a huge part of that equation, is we may not be reducing our costs, you know, it's very hard to reduce costs over time, as we're all familiar, but whatever we can do, i.e. in this form, grant money to bring in to offset the increases in those expenses is great. And we've done well at that with both our highway department head and with our head of our fire department. But I think you're right. I mean, and we lean on the finance director to do that. I mean, I know Chip works those guys over. I know Cynthia worked those guys over. And I
Yeah,
think
no,
you work
I'm
them
like,
over too,
any
so.
fluff, I was like,
Exactly. So I think we would find there probably wouldn't be a whole lot more, but it's definitely about
Yeah.
It's a good idea perhaps to document it, and you are right, Mr. Chairman, that grants should be put alongside that, because that is money that we
Absolutely.
yeah.
that we have received. But it is simply so that perhaps because it's in the town reporter and a handout at town meeting, or simply is stated at town meeting, people actually know
Right.
what was done.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not a matter, and as far as finance directors and people like that, the problem is they're not actually running the departments. So they do not so they are unlikely to be the most expert about how a given department could save money.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think we have the advantage of having, you know, we're a small operation for all practical purposes, and we have good relationships. So I think those things play out. Again, I'm not trying to defend.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not taking it as criticism or defending it, but these are definitely very real, ongoing conversations all the time because of the small nature of the interaction between the finance director and the department head. So,
And from my experience as just a taxpayer before I got involved here, I didn't know what was going on, and I wish I'd known more. So I take your point well, and I think it's a great idea. And as I'm learning here, and I get a better idea of where the money comes from and where it goes to and who's doing what with what, and I get a bigger picture, I become, you know, more educated in what's happening. I have a more realistic. Sorry.
I think too, though, in the reports, and in the reports that are written, there's mention of things like grants and
Yes.
what they did
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
they saved.
yeah, keep everybody honest.
Keep the taxpayers informed too.
Yeah.
I think
Right.
that will make better relations between them and having to
Yeah.
do our job.
Yep,
We've said it 1,000 times, if more people showed up to town meeting, you know,
that would help.
that would help.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
All right. Yeah, what's next?
So we talked about the library.
Library, we're in pretty good shape on that. Draft articles for town meeting, okay.
What about number one? Library status from private to public. Do you have any history with that?
Yeah, educate me on that.
So, 2014.
Right.
The public library became, the private library became a public library. But it's governed by the board of trustees of the library.
Yes.
Which is
Okay,
correct.
so they manage and operate under their budget and within the library.
Right. Well, it's private in a way, but we vote on them. I mean, we elect trustees,
Correct.
We do.
yes.
Oh,
We
I
no,
thought
we
they-
the voters.
Okay.
Yes.
elect trustees.
Okay.
So it's private, but they don't choose it. I mean, it's not really, yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know how I would describe that. So I guess what's the question?
So the question is, if we have a budget in front of us and it was approved by the governing body of the library, do we have,
An obligation?
right,
No. No, we,
That's a recommendation, not actually a budget.
well,
We
it's
make
their,
it a budget.
it's
Is
their, right, it's their budget, and we can say,
No.
cut 20,000 and come back to
Right,
us.
okay.
okay,
And or, I mean, historically, what, more often, what would be the case is we say, present it to the voters and see what they say. But as we have talked about before, even if somebody wanted to cut 20,000 from the budget of the library from the floor, that can be a recommendation, but that can't be mandated by the voters, that we actually cut there. They can say the general fund budget has to be reduced by $20,000, but they can't say you need to cut 20,000 from the library, because that's just not the way it works. So,
so if they run a
So-
deficit in any given year, and as the finance officer,
right,
what is the protocol? Is it
I'm not,
covered in the surplus? How does that work?
Oh, are we obligated to make up the difference in the deficit?
Right.
Are we?
Although,
I don't recall that happening, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't, I just don't recall.
actually, I want to point out in our draft audit, it does state that the select board would be collecting any deficit, because they are carrying a deficit right now. Let's see if I can find that. I did see that. So if it's in the audit, I presume that we do have to collect that deficit.
Maybe this is an opportunity for the head of that department to tell us why they're running the deficit. So-
Should I call the board of trustees?
Well, and that may have built up, I don't know the history of that. I mean, that may have built up over the last, that may have been, we're showing a deficit of $9,949, that may have built up to the tune of, $2,000. It may have been $7,000
Right.
last year,
Right.
5 years. I don't know. I mean, that's the other thing. Well, I mean, I think there's two ways we could approach that. Yes, we may be responsible for that, but, right, okay. So that's what I was just gonna say is we could, we could say you need to reduce your budget by that amount so that it offsets it in the
Right.
contribution from the town.
Right.
That's a lot to do in a year. I think that what would be probably more realistic based on what their budget is would be to say, we need to see this decrease over the next 3 years and you can't run a deficit. I mean, I mean, I think from that perspective, and I'm speaking off the cuff here a little bit because I don't know what the legal obligations are as far as the town versus the library is concerned. But, I think we could say, this can't happen again. And it sounds like, I mean, that's essentially what John Mudgett is recommending, is intends to recover so he must have had that conversation with them, or you must have had that conversation.
No.
Somebody must have had that conversation, because it says intends
Is there any memorandum? when-
from them.
Yeah, when it went from private to public,
I'm sure that
on
it is.
how to operate, how,
Who
What
would
does that
probably
actually
be,
say? What is it?
at
What does
June
that
3rd, deficit fund balance, so these are the notes to the financial statements. At June 30th, 2019, the library operating fund has a deficit fund balance of $97.40. Management intends to recover this deficit through future operating and fundraising activities. So somebody had to have had that conversation
right.
in order for that to be in there. You know who I would ask if you wanted, my guess who would be able to give you the most accurate history would be Chris Osgood. I'm pretty sure he was either the president or the treasurer at that time. Actually, you know who else might be able to answer that would be Randy Smith, either one of those.
Okay.
Randy's definitely well informed about it, as would Chris. I think Chris was the president.
Okay.
I assume the deficit is after other income, like the copy machine, the donations, and.
That's an overall deficit in their
overall
budget.
deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I do think, as you could do with the fire department, we could just say, you know, we need to work this out and this can't happen again. I mean, you
Right.
need to run the level budget.
Right.
You know, that.
Yeah, level budget's good when
I mean, our funding for them, in my recollection, is virtually never level funding year over year. But that's largely because we add programming year after year. And I mean, it's a dynamic organization, and
Yeah, the other thing too with any budget, you know, so if we have a tax sale, of course, we get some revenue, because everybody will pay their taxes before the tax sale. But when we have a tax sale, we do generate some revenue, but, you know, we don't have a chance to do that all the time. So it's really hard, and you will get financial reports next week. I don't want to give you all that tonight with the budget.
yeah.
But, you know, I keep an eye on it, quarterly reports, that's what we gotta be looking at, because when you start seeing things that are already 50% over, that's the time we talk to department heads.
Well, right, no, and I think that's very much the same thing with the
Right,
library.
right,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, the reality is that when you look at what the library has done since the construction of the new library, they just increased their outreach and they're doing all sorts of things that justify having a budget.
Right.
Doesn't justify
Yeah,
having a deficit.
right, so
But-
first to find out would be, where did that come from? Why is there a deficit?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
We need to, yeah.
Well, that would be pretty easy to tease out. I mean, that's not, you know, just look at the library, you know, certainly Emily would be able to tell you pretty
Yeah.
darn accurately why that happened, or you may already know.
I don't know, because, see, we give the appropriation.
Right, but we don't actually
Why you're
manage the
looking for
budget.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
Right,
It's
Yeah,
ju-
we pay their bills, but, you know,
it's just one step removed,
yeah.
yeah.
Talk to Chris. I think Chris would be helpful. Meredith might also. I mean, I don't know, you know,
Yeah.
but I don't think I can't remember how long. I know Meredith has been involved for a long time, but I'm not sure whether she would know about that. But Chris would definitely, Chris and Randy.
Okay, I will pursue that some more and get a better understanding how it's going to work.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, you know, as we've been talking about with everything else, you know, the reality of, you know, if you just look at it straight up as a business, the reality of running a business that is a thriving business, but is not a business for profit, then expenses go up every year, and that's just what it is. You know, I think Mr. Fairman's point, though, from before, would be very appropriate here to say, okay, your budget goes up by this much every year, but what are you doing to keep it from going
Right.
up? And again, I would assume you'd get reasonable answers to that, but it's a question that should be asked.
Yep.
So. All right. Alyssa's losing steam, so what are we gonna do here? Pick up the pace. What do we got next?
Stop talking so much.
So your draft warnings, draft articles,
Draft articles. Oh, I saw, the one thing I had noticed was that it said Putney Club, and I was thinking, well, that was a sandwich at the co-op, but now it says Putney Gun Club, so somebody corrected
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I have one comment on that, and I don't know that this is an appropriate place to bring it up, but I know that last year, parked at the entrance to the gun club was a vehicle that was broken down and seemed to be parked there for sort of indefinitely. And personally, to me, I wasn't pleased with the fact that the gun club property was being used for that purpose, but that's maybe separate from anything else
Yeah.
related to this. But I think that, I don't know whether that's happening this year, but it did happen last year, and I think that they need to be responsible landowners if they're.
We own the gun club, the town
No.
owns the gun club?
No.
No, we exempt it.
Yeah. So there's 3 gentlemen. David Smith, I've already had a conversation with him, he came into the office. So they are interested in putting this on, at town meeting. They will write a report for the town report, so we'll know what they did, in a year's time.
The public would like to know what the article is.
The article is to see if the town will vote to exempt the Putney Gun Club from municipal and educational taxation on the improvements, appurtenances, and land off of Sand Hill Road, lot number so-and-so, for a period of 5 years. And actually, it generated a very interesting conversation when the last time this came up, which presumably was 5 years ago, when from the floor, somebody said, I don't want to support a gun club because I don't know what a gun club, why would I want to support that? And it was a very interesting discussion. It was very educational because in fact, primarily what the gun club does is run, my recollection is that primarily what it does is runs hunter safety courses and keeps people updated on their knowledge and use of guns for hunting and other practical purposes, and that was a valuable thing for taxpayers to know.
Right.
Because we don't have anybody else in the neighborhood who's doing that.
Right.
And that's a valuable service to us for particularly young people who are interested in hunting, and
But do
that's
they
a good
even
service
do
to have.
anything? Do they do anything anymore?
Who, at the gun club?
Yeah,
Oh, I think so, but I don't know.
Are they still shooting?
nobody's been able to get in touch with them,
So-
last I know.
Oh, so maybe not, I don't know.
So David Smith
There you
was
go.
in my office, and I expressed that somebody needed to be at town meeting to speak on this article.
Yeah.
So there's a gentleman over in Williamsville, and then there's a third person, so.
So are they gonna write a report for this year's town report? Okay,
Yeah.
so, and that should be clear. I mean, if they aren't doing anything, then
Right.
this would be a good question.
I know David Smith is not well, but he came into the office.
I guess the other question I would ask related to that is if they, well, we don't know what they've been doing because we haven't seen the report.
Right.
But if they're doing less than they historically have, what are they doing to change that situation?
Right.
And why should we support them for 5 years going forward?
And I don't know how much those.
Do we typically do that for the, I'm questioning whether we usually exempt them from educational tax as well.
That's the one that was in the other book.
This is the previous,
Yeah, I took it out of the other book.
from 5 years ago?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess the answer is yes, we typically do.
Where is that? Putney Gun Club right here. So that's their value.
Yeah. The value of the property is $87,200 as a non-residential,
Right.
which is not a huge taxable number, but that's always a question when this kind of thing comes up is how much tax would that generate?
Right.
And we can,
Just like this.
I'll have to get that number.
Exactly.
I'll get that number
And this is,
from,
but this is only municipal. This
I
is
see.
not education.
Got it.
So actually, that's an
number.
interesting question, Karen. Why is this only municipal and not educational?
That would be a lister's question.
Okay.
Huh.
I don't know.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it occurs to me, in politics, they talk about optics, and if, you mentioned a gentleman from Williamsville, if a gentleman from Williamsville showed up at town meeting to speak for this, it would be very obvious because he would first have to receive permission of
Right.
the assembly
Yeah.
in order to speak. And that doesn't produce very good optics versus they're sending someone who actually lives in Putney.
I would tend to agree with you that.
None of them live in Putney.
Okay, so, again, the conversation that it generated last time was somebody being able to stand up and speak very specifically to that. And I don't remember the specifics of it, but, an example might be that this guy lives in Williamsville, but he teaches a hunter safety course here, 4 times a year or something. In which case, the optics of it would be different than somebody saying, oh yeah, I come over here to shoot every, 4 weeks or something. So, I don't know, but that's up to that, that's why we ask anybody who's asking for something like this to have somebody available at town meeting. So they can ask, because if it doesn't look good, then they're gonna have a hard time getting it to be voted in, so. But. All right,
So Article 10, I put it in there, but
right,
I'm still researching the property. I want to get a hold of State of Vermont Forester. We don't have a forest plan for Putney Mountain.
for this property on Putney
Right.
Mountain. Which we wouldn't have been required to have.
No, but
We,
I think the question came up before, what is
right,
for timber on that property?
right.
That was pretty,
So-
yeah.
Before we jump the gun, no pun intended,
No, that was this article, yeah. exactly.
I'm sitting on the fence about, I wanna do my due diligence to make sure we have all our facts about Putney Mountain.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I wondered about that too. I think that one of the things that would be a debate, Putney Mountain Association, I think, does not harvest timber. Do you know?
I think the language in their various conservation easements with Vermont Land Trust have language such as managing to control invasive species, they can
Right.
harvest, they can, in some cases, have plans to manage for the health of the forest
Right.
and to create appropriate wildlife habitat that they decide they want. But in essence, they do not timber for profit.
Right, no, and I think that managing for the health of the forest makes perfect sense, because I think that, especially with the discussion that's going on at state level in conservation areas, et cetera, the value of carbon storage of mature and maturing forests, is very valuable. So my personal opinion would be that we probably, I'm assuming sort of what you're getting at is there valuable timber here that we should be harvesting before we transfer a property? I don't know whether that's what you're getting at. But I know you and I had that discussion.
That was my
at
first
some
thought.
point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would like to have a forester look at that,
Yep.
maybe have a plan, and then see what the value is.
Yep.
That would be a radical change from
Departure.
what has happened over the years, and I think
That
you're
would be
gonna
my
get
guess
a
as well.
lot of public opinion about doing that, one thing. I'm also into the carbon sequestration thing.
Yes.
We're looking at a 11-year now, it used to be 12, really terrible situation with the climate. These trees hold carbon. And the argument for,
Yeah.
timber harvesting is obviously, well, new trees will grow up, they will sequester carbon.
Right.
But that, if you
Big long
cut
time.
down a 70-year-old tree,
Right.
it will take 70 years for an equal amount of
Just
carbon
carbon.
to
Yes.
be sequestered.
Yeah,
And we don't have 70 years.
right.
Well, I'm not talking about actually cutting them, but knowing what's on that property. Forest management is very important. I know it's a wildlife corridor. And I was thinking too, what would it put back on the tax rolls? and Jordy gave me the number, and it's less than $900 a year.
Because it's all in current use.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
But, as David often points
Right.
out, it's $900. It's 900 more than we're getting right now.
But again, I think due diligence is important with this. This is, you know.
I definitely agree with you, however, I mean, I think that we're fortunate in that we have an organization as well-run and as responsible as Putney Mountain Association. You know, my own opinion would be, I mean, I'm not objecting to having somebody look at it, but my own opinion would be, these are the people that we trust to do this kind of thing. Why would we want to insert ourselves before that as opposed to saying, here's a piece of land, keep doing what you're doing so well?
Right,
And I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying that.
I just wanna make
I'm not
sure we see both sides here.
And I think it's important, I think what you're doing is important, and I think knowing the information would be a good thing, not with the intent to go in there and log it. But I think it speaks to what Howard was saying earlier too, that we're looking at everything.
Right.
Look at every piece of it.
Right.
Because everything is going up and getting more expensive, and everybody needs to know that we're looking at everything we can possibly do for the good of the planet
Right.
and for keeping things paid for.
And I'm all
So
for
knowing the
that,
information is
especially
great.
after Australia.
So does that mean that if you're gonna do that, it's gonna come off of the warrant?
So-
Because we wouldn't be able to do that.
So what we could do is take it off the warning for town meeting, but we could do a 30-day notice, because it's land that, you know, potentially we want to sell. You warn it, post it, have the meeting, and then you can vote that way too.
Yeah, the other thing,
I just want to make sure
the
we're
other
ready.
thing, the other thing to do, and I don't know that statute allows for this, but the other thing we potentially could do, I mean, it's, the first statement of the article is to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to sell approximately 68 acres. The fact that they authorized us to sell it doesn't mean that we are obligated to sell it.
Right.
So, you know, does it
Oh,
make
good
sense to
point.
get the
Good point.
authorization?
Yep.
And I don't know how
Good point.
I don't know how that might change that
Yep.
wording, but, you know, to see if the town, upon completion of due diligence, is authorized to sell or something along those lines. I'm not sure what but, you know, then we're not delaying it for a full year, which it's only a year, it's a piece of land, it's not going
Right,
anywhere.
right, right.
But,
No, I like your point
you
right
know,
there, that's
might be.
good.
The other thing I'd like to say about having a forester do an actual survey of this, you know, come out, do the plot plan, you know, do little sections where they figure out how many board feet and then they multiply
Right.
and whatever. That's gonna be 2,000. I don't think Sam, who's the county forester, is gonna come out and do that kind of detailed analysis for us. He might do a quick walkthrough. But to get a really detailed,
An accurate assessment.
an accurate
Yeah.
assessment, you'd have to pay money.
And then,
And then we got an estimate for just the 55 acres on Route 5 of about 2,000 to 3,000 for that
to
kind
get
of
a proper
accurate-
timber
yes.
assessment of it.
Yeah, I think it was 2,000.
Yeah.
And the other thing I just want to mention is the west side of that piece of land, the Brookline side, is heavily evergreen, mainly hemlocks and pines, and mainly hemlocks, and it's very steep. It's really terrible in terms of working safely, but also it's probably deer wintering. We need to check with Fish and Wildlife as to whether it's mapped as deer wintering.
Well, and of course, the reality is that hemlock in particular, but both hemlock and pine have very little timber value as
I know.
far as sale
Yeah.
is concerned.
I don't
And I
think,
think that it would be an area, because of its sensitivity, you know, the value of timber harvesting versus the value of not timber harvesting in there would be questionable. But I totally agree with you, due diligence is all appropriate, Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, 2 points. First, I would suggest that instead of guessing what the county forester might say about this matter, that we ask the county forester.
Yeah.
The other thing is, we have an opportunity to perhaps send a letter to obtain any information we wish, because the annual meeting of the Putney Mountain Association is scheduled for this Sunday at the Putney Community Center, 4 p.m.
Okay.
So if we
I'm
would like,
not sure what we would be asking of them in this situation,
Right.
but, but that might be worth you thinking about it in the next day or so. Are there questions? I guess I would also, well, something that might be worth bringing up at that meeting would be, as we talked about with the gun club, having somebody there from Putney Mountain Association who has informed themselves about this and can speak intelligently.
Right.
Howard Shields and I were actually looking on deed restrictions that the town might want when we transfer the land to
Yeah.
Putney Mountain,
Yeah.
which would be helpful to them and to us, which pretty much says it shall remain undeveloped.
Yes.
Right.
In essence, in other words, and also that it can't be just resold.
Right.
In
Right.
other words, it has to continue, if they dissolve and no longer own it, then it has to go to another nonprofit or public entity with similar purposes.
Which
Just
I would
stuff.
have to assume that VLT, Vermont Land Trust, requires that kind of.
Yes, they do,
anyway,
but they're not
but-
involved in this transaction.
Right, no, I know,
And so we're
but
sort of
this
substitute.
transaction, that I would assume that they would end up being the conservation partner in this ultimately, but is that not right? Okay.
It's just gonna be a transfer from the town to the Putney Mountain Association. So we were at least
And then who
trying
holds-
to do a deed restriction that limits them in what they can do.
So would there
and-
not be an easement on it then?
No, because an easement will cost you another $20,000.
Okay, so I was under the assumption that if it were transferred to the Putney Mountain Association, more than likely Putney Mountain Association would go to Vermont Land Trust for an
Right.
easement, but
They would
maybe
have,
that's not the case.
They would prefer not to have to pay the legal fees,
That makes sense.
the stewardship money, and all of those other things.
So they would then be responsible for the stewardship, which would be maybe.
And the Conservation Commission could
Right.
certainly check on an annual
Yeah, yeah,
basis whether
yeah.
the deed restrictions were being followed.
Yeah.
I mean, that would not be a big deal. It'd be fun. Just go for a hike.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Larry was pretty knowledgeable about this kind of thing too. It might be worth just touching base with him.
I sent this over
Did
to
you?
his
Okay.
office already, so,
But you set the whole warrant.
the draft, yeah.
Yeah, but it might be worth highlighting that and saying, Larry, do you have an opinion about this? Because he wouldn't.
He
It's
always
just,
has
it's
an
sort of up his alley. Yeah, I know. Larry's like town council.
He already talked to me about this.
Did he?
And I
Yeah.
emailed you the, where
I
we're at.
did.
We're not completed
Right.
negotiations about deed restrictions, but I
Yeah.
did let you know what we're up to.
Yeah, I'll take a look at those, yeah.
And I'm sure Sam would be willing to walk the property if you want to.
Yeah, I think, if no one's done it, I think it'd be worth.
There are also people, I mean, for example, Hayden Lake is involved in.
He's on the,
At least he's-
Putney Mountain Association Board.
Exactly, so, and he's a knowledgeable forester.
Mhm.
You know, he would certainly be able to offer an opinion, I don't.
Yes, I think
you
he
know,
would, yeah.
He'd be biased in the Putney Mountain Association direction, but he also is a guy who clearly is largely involved in looking out for the best interests of landowners in the area, so, you know, I think he could offer.
Yeah. He's already commented on the proposed deed restrictions, so he's already involved to a
Okay.
certain degree.
Yeah. All right, what else?
Everything else is pretty much standard. Okay.
Okay, yeah. All right, so what do we have next?
We have the
got-
draft
you got-
audit for fiscal year 2019.
Oh, yeah.
That's in your packet, and John Levitt's gonna be here next week on Wednesday
Okay.
to brief you.
So we have the opportunity to look at it between now and then.
Yep. So the general
If you need a
fund,
good nap, David, this is a good place to start.
the general fund has a surplus for 2019, and so does the highway department.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're gonna have to read it to me.
You don't know.
just, yeah, I have not, I saw that it was there, but I haven't looked at it yet. Night, Ann, thanks for coming.
I would take the time to look at it
Yeah,
before the
no,
next
just
meeting.
manager, what are his statements? I mean, do we have any material deficits or anything that we,
No, it's the same thing as last year, Josh.
there are some comments, but,
Yep, it's, basically training and, the
Right.
fixed assets were a problem and
yeah,
I think Melissa's got a really good handle on them now.
yeah.
And she and I talked back and forth and it's like, I don't know how Laura did it because nothing was numbered and I'm like going, which truck is that again? But we are defining, it's gotten a lot better. So I did write a letter for my responses
Okay,
and I sent them over to John, but again, they're the same, points that we had issues with last year.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you want the, when you're looking, the last 3 pages are really the part
At
that,
some point when I have time, I need to like really dig in some more on that and find out. I think there's things, I identified a lot of things that weren't in there in the assets that should have been already, but I think that there might be even more. So, it's trying to piece the puzzle together with some pieces missing.
Yeah, and the
Well,
capital
and-
plan too doesn't really help us, because that's like
That's kind of weird too.
future planning, but, like any new assets, obviously they go right into the memory system,
right.
but,
Excuse me.
and you can't delete anything, so, because that affects your audit.
Yeah. Then he starts poking around even more.
Yeah, well,
All right, so town manager's report, what do you have? We've been through most of it or not yet?
kind of, sort of. So Wyndham Regional Commission has a broadband meeting at Newbrook Fire Department on January 16th at 6 PM. I'm making that announcement because they're trying to push broadband as a utility and trying to have municipalities buy into it. I'm not knowledgeable enough to,
Yeah.
Maybe there was something, there was some posting about that a month ago.
so I am gonna go to that meeting.
Okay.
And I think we may have some other people from the community as well.
Yeah, you might want to think about, we might all want to think about, but you might want to think about if there's anybody specific that you want to make sure they know about that meeting. Because there are a handful of people who, nobody's coming to mind right off the bat, but I'll think about that as well. But I'm sure there's a couple people in town who would be,
Yeah, Mr. Fairman and I have been talking,
okay,
because we're following the Chesterfield, how they bought into Consolidated.
Right.
And, and there's a lot of companies out there and the state's pushing it.
right,
As a trump from northern Vermont down to the southern tier, but Mr. Fairman had a good point. I mean, go ahead.
No, please, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you go ahead.
I don't think I'm going to say what you were going to say.
No, I think you are.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
What I was going to say is the reason for the meeting is the Wyndham Regional Commission has received a $60,000 grant
Right,
for planning in this regard.
yes,
So this is the initial meeting
yeah,
about what they might do with the money.
yeah.
So wasn't there something in the email you sent about they're trying to set up groups, focus groups in communities to see what people want and what their desire is for it, and then.
What their needs are.
Right.
Mr. Fairman had a good point. It's, so you can put fiber optics through town, but it's that last mile.
Right.
If you
That's
can't
our-
hook that
That's
person
our
up,
problem still,
yeah.
No,
Right.
and we have fiber optics. I mean, this is not our,
We have fiber optics
yeah,
in
we've
Putney.
got a trunk going down
Yeah.
Route 5.
Yeah.
So, that's, I guess, my question is, how do we, as a township that's on a fiber optic line,
Yeah.
what's our involvement? And I don't know, and I would
What's
lean
the
on Wyndham
cost?
Regional. You know who should definitely know about this is, I'm sure he does, is our new Wyndham Regional rep.
Steve Dotson.
Exactly. You know, because
And
this
he
is the
might be
kind
at
of
that
thing you
meeting
have,
too.
well, he should know about it,
Yeah.
definitely. If he, I mean, I'm sure he does know about it, but he might want to be reminded. But, you know, what, you know, if you think of a town like, just to pull, you know, Whitingham or Halifax or somewhere, you know, the need for them for this may be way different than it is
Right.
for a town like us. I have no idea.
Well, again, and I have an issue asking taxpayers to pay for something if not everybody's gonna
Absolutely.
be.
Yeah. Who benefits from it and
Right,
why?
right.
Yeah. No, and what's it gonna add to what we already have? That
Right.
would be my biggest question,
Yeah.
because it's that, like you said, it's that last mile thing.
Yeah.
If this isn't gonna help us with the last mile,
Yep.
why would we be interested? I have no idea. There may be good answers to that
Yeah.
question. but-
So I will attend that meeting and,
These are matters that I do intend to bring up at the meeting. You have referred to the intermediate internet trunk lines, but when you look at Putney Village, for example, crest of the hill, crest of Kimball Hill, they have quite fast internet from the War Center on Christian Square, but down at the co-op, they don't. Just that difference in distance drops the basic internet speed by about 25%. So when we say Putney, it really depends on which neighborhood. And this is something that the people who did the project in Chesterfield pointed out. Now, I'm basing this only on what I read in the Reformer. What they said was, people tend to look in terms of census tracts, but that actually is irrelevant out in the country. The question is your house, my house, and someone else's house.
Absolutely. No, and I mean, we were talking about that at the last meeting, because David, for example, I think you're the last house on Black Locust Road, you know, and there's not a huge number of residences, but there's 4 or 5 beyond David.
7.
So, you know, and they don't have access to it.
Nothing.
And so what good does it do them to have an increase? You know, I think that's, again, getting back to the last mile aspect of it. But I get your point also. I wasn't aware that there was that difference right here in the village also. So, you know, that's totally counterintuitive to me, but I don't understand anything about it. So,
Well, the reason, I'm talking now about the telephone company service, and the reason is simply electronic. There's not, with copper wires. you can't-
capacity, yeah.
It's inductive and capacitive reactance, technically
Yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
And there isn't anything you can do about it.
To change that,
It's physics.
Right.
And this, of course, is the advantage of fiber optics.
Right.
They don't encounter this problem. Something I plan to point out at the meeting in Newfane is that a project like this should be, the economics should be done in terms of serving everyone.
Right.
Because as soon as you start segregating it, then there's the people who live out at the end of Black Locust Road who are never going to get served because there never will be a return on investment.
Exactly.
There never will be a return on investment
Right.
on serving your house. But if people where the return on investment is very high, as in Putney Village, if these people are charged enough to subsidize getting to your house and everyone else who lives way out there, then it becomes feasible.
But that's the point that Karen brought up also is, you know, to whose benefit is it, you know, is it worth the people in the village subsidizing those all the way out? And that's a quite, you know, I guess that's sort of the whole question behind this exploration is what the value for who is.
Well, this is true, Mr. Chairman. However, the rationale you have just laid out applies to the highway network as well.
Absolutely.
And really, telecommunications now is more like the highway network than anything else.
Smaller,
You know,
yeah.
everybody gets access to their homes as long as they live on a town road.
Right.
We don't say, you live way out, so we're gonna plow your road sometime next year, you know?
Yeah.
So why is that happening? Don't say nothing.
Yeah.
No. Good point. So all of the communities, all the concentrated communities need to be figured into this whole statewide formula, so that, see if they could be charged in a way that the rural people can be served.
Well, this in fact is of course the way, take the telephone company. That is the way, their landline business is a regulated business by the Vermont Public Utility Commission. They ask for a return on investment based on serving everyone, everywhere. Not on the basis of we will, in the business it's called cream skimming, we will serve Putney Village because that's easy. But out at your house, hey, maybe it'll work someday.
Not worth it, yeah.
Right. Good point.
So I'll be going to that meeting.
Good.
Highway Department status update, everything, roads are in good shape, I mean, sidewalks are in good shape,
Mm-hmm.
so
Good.
nothing to report there. I do wanna mention.
Hang on.
What happened with the stone wall over here? I wondered.
Hey, so,
I already had this
Oh,
conversation.
sorry, I just didn't, I came the day it happened, and it looked like a truck backed into it.
now I was sidewalk plow, it caught the corner of the wall, cause the walls are leaning out,
Okay.
and there's just barely enough room between the wall and the edge of the sidewalk.
Right.
So, the tractor did.
Because it didn't look that way when I looked at it. It looked like he stopped in time and missed it.
No,
Okay.
no, and the railing got damaged, and I called Paul Bemis.
Yep.
Paul Bemis went down and looked at it. He took the railing off, because
Yep.
if somebody would've grabbed it, it would've broke. He's
Where's
gonna get us price. It's right here in front of the Gleanery.
Kimball Hill first, yeah.
The town of the building, yeah.
So, I talked to Brian already knew about it. So, it caught, I
Yeah.
mean, that whole wall. So Josh and I had a conversation too, it was part of the sidewalk project.
Mhm.
Those walls were built, but who maintains them? They are in our right of way. So this might be something that when we do a sidewalk policy for the sidewalk reserve fund.
Yeah, no, and I think it's definitely, and I think we'd have to look back, whether there's historical information available or not. But, at some point, somebody along that road, their wall is gonna fall down and they are either not gonna be able to afford or
Right.
not gonna care to afford doing anything about it. What's our obligation?
Right.
And I know, that was a big discussion when that sidewalk went in, is whose responsibility would maintenance be? And I don't know whether things were properly established as far as, for example, the walls were concerned. I know there was discussion about the lawn strips and things like that, but stone walls that's an expensive prospect to start rebuilding stone walls if they're
Right.
problematic.
So we'll look at that when we do a policy.
Yep.
Because we may have to include those walls.
Yeah.
Now, Paul Bemis did not do the wall in front of the Gleanery.
No.
Right,
He
but he
did
did.
next stage
And
wells.
he did do wells also?
No,
And he did
Familari.
Familari, yeah.
Yep. So Paul was good, he came right down, looked at it, he's gonna give us a price.
Yeah. No, and part of the discussion I had with Karen related to that is, some of those walls are leaning a little bit now. Would it be in our best interest if we do have responsibility for maintenance to do maintenance as opposed to waiting until they come down?
A lot cheaper than rebuilding.
That would be my sense,
Yeah.
but,
And Paul did say it's all snowed in right now, so there's nothing
He
we're
can
gonna
do-
do.
right, no, I
one's
totally
gonna touch
agree.
it right now,
yeah,
Yep.
so.
yeah,
And all I did was request the estimate and then we will,
yeah, get up from there.
yeah, I'm not saying, we'll talk further with the owners and Brian.
Yeah,
Come
of
to
course, my sense is from looking at it, there's not a huge amount of expense there. Yes, the wall was leaning, but we did do the damage to it. Whose responsibility is
Right.
that? We're probably looking at, I don't know, several hundred to a few $1,000 maybe, but when one of those, you know, 9-foot high walls has the same problem,
Right.
we're talking real money. Yeah, exactly, so.
Yeah, that's-
And whose responsibility is it then, and what's our obligation safety-wise in that case, so. But, all right, moving right along.
we are. So, next meeting, January 15th, I'd like to invite the public, because we will be discussing the budget again. And if anybody wants to,
That's the time.
yes.
Hallelujah.
And our auditor will also be here, so it's perfect timing. And everything's draft right now, and it is public information, so if
Yep.
anybody's interested, they can call the office and we can get them a copy. But it will change.
The venue for the 15th?
No, I was,
What's that?
no, I was thinking if we had too many people, do we wanna consider the fire station, or
Too many people for what?
that will attend the meeting?
For a budget meeting?
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about that.
Okay. Moving
That
on.
would be my opinion.
Alright, so moving on, I just wanna thank whoever put the lovely wreath out at the Veterans Memorial before Christmas. That was very, very kind of you.
Oh, I know who it is.
I know,
remember.
yeah,
I know who it is.
heard,
They came in here and told me they did it.
It
My
was,
mom did
your mom, that's right, I'm
My
your
mom and I
mom,
did
look at
that. My
that.
mom and I did that.
Oh my God, David, that was,
Thank you, Eleanor.
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thanks. See, Mom?
David,
Celebrity.
make sure you say thank you. I thought that was the kindest thing. I was walking in the office, I'm like, oh, somebody put a wreath right there. That is like wonderful.
Yeah.
You know, it's a single little, you know,
A lot of dead relatives on that
I didn't have
marble out
to
there.
add that, but it was a nice thought. It was very kind.
I was
Thank
like,
you.
I know who did that. Who did that?
Oh my
That's right.
God.
You
She's,
did.
she's glad to
Okay.
meet you. You were gone that day, Karen. She wanted
So.
to meet you guys, so.
And we did send flowers out to 2 people in the community, so
Okay.
Thank you for that. Thank you for saying that.
that's it. Yes. No, I thought that was very kind of her to do that.
Warrants.
Make a,
Would you like to,
yeah, make a motion to approve the warrants of January 2020 and execute upon review.
There you go.
I'll second that, and if there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm just gonna add to that.
You corrected it.
Oh, okay, so payroll.
Thank you very much.
That's a different looking, is this the,
Yeah. This is a, yeah,
is this the new format through Chip,
No.
or is this just
no.
It's just the way that she did it
something's
that
just a
time.
little odd?
All right, so payroll warrant dated January 3rd, 2020, in the amount of $8,200.23. So that has the library on it. We will be going to bi-weekly. Payroll, okay. So payroll warrant dated, I did this backwards, sorry, December 27th, 2019, $12,743.30. So that's what we're used to. Got me all confused.
I had them in order. You changed them.
I didn't really know they were here, but.
This group is definitely getting bigger than.
Yes, it
that's
is.
good. We're pointing out that people have available to them the ability to have their checks deposited electronically, and it's been a slow process, but now we're looking like we're getting most people moved there.
That's because the fire department has to.
There you go.
All new
That's the way to do it.
Tom didn't give him a choice.
Yeah.
Accounts payable dated December 21st, 2019 through January 3rd, 2020, in the amount of $47,803.12. And, I mean, I haven't really looked at this, so.
That's specific.
But it's a small one, which is nice.
Why 9,000 to Chittenden? Is that just a debt service?
That was the
Must be.
truck.
Yeah.
Up the Chevy.
What did you say?
The Chevy. John's house.
Fast service, complete auto service. Who's fast service?
That is for a plow.
Snow plow.
We just, Brian asked me
Used to be
about
a
that.
hydraulic jack or something like that now.
It was a plow, because the
From
one,
Gilsum?
the,
Is that-
the V
Oh,
plow.
no, Vassar's in Greenfield. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he ordered a new plow because it was ready to snap right in the middle. So they gave him a little bit for trade-in, and he got it down, you know, to,
I weld a lot of them. I have a lot of guys with those same V-plows and they're not built rugged enough. Right? So
Yeah.
I've welded Carl Mosier's 3 times.
That would be a hard thing to build rugged. Well,
You-
it's not,
you-
but.
No, if you used good
If you
steel,
use
and
the
you
right
heavy
material,
steel,
yeah.
you built the pivot so that it wasn't vulnerable to the leverage of each side, the way they build it, and it wouldn't break. But,
and
And
Brian
you
thought
resell some.
about that, but the wear and tear,
yeah.
he didn't think it was gonna last, so.
And
what
was it regional?
5 grand?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That is for a grant, so those were services for the stormwater culverts.
So that's repaying grant money?
So-
What is that?
They charge for their time,
Oh, okay.
and then we pay them, and then
And then
I
we receive
submit,
the money.
I
Yeah.
submit the grant.
I don't know what happened to my agenda.
I don't know, you're just like, you lost your pen and everything.
David must have taken
I don't think I did.
Just don't forget that.
it.
So what else do we have?
Do we have any other business? Oh, let's see. There was one piece of other business. You had already had this discussion. I'm trying to remember because I said I would bring it up today. Darn it. Did you have a discussion with something about? Jordy Heller, the question of whether, and this is, I only am bringing it up, we don't need to discuss it with, but we should probably put it on the agenda for next week. The question of whether we should have an article related to whether listers should be appointed as opposed to elected. And so Jordy, I think is gonna be here next week anyway.
It's actually on there. I
Oh.
should have mentioned that, I'm sorry, because it is a new,
Purchase.
shall the voters.
What the, was that in our packet that you sent out? I missed that.
No, that's new, I just added
You
it
had
today.
it, oh, okay. Okay, so,
Yeah.
so we'll discuss that next week.
Yep.
Any need for executive session?
No.
Okay. Our next meeting date is January 15th. And the
Fine.
venue will be in fact here, because we don't anticipate large crowds, but we can always accommodate if we need to.
More body heat will be good.
And otherwise, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second that, and if there's no further discussion, all in favor? All right,
Aye.
Good
Good.
job.
thank you all.
Thank you, Howard.